All right, welcome back to the Not Just a Pony Ride podcast. Today we're going to talk about all of our adventures we've had this last weekend. I have two guests with me today, Shelby and Edye. Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Okay, so Shelby, why don't we start with you? Tell us where you went this last weekend.
Okay. We were at the PATH International Region 7 conference, which was hosted by Main Stay Therapeutic Farm in Illinois. Main Stay has a beautiful, beautiful facility, did a great job hosting this event. We're very well equipped and put together a really nice schedule of presenters. So one of the things I really liked about this conference that Main Stay did really well was they developed a little bit of a leadership in EAS track. So there were several topics so there was one on the future of giving. So just talking about kind of what is the current climate of donations and donor relations, and looking at how there's going to be a really big shift of wealth happening from baby boomers into millennials over the next few years. And so
That's a good point.
what that looks like. Yeah. And it was one thing I found really interesting is that there's been a change over the last few years, and that women are driving almost all of donor relations and giving at this point, which was really important
Did they
because
reason or was there a reason for why they think that is?
she didn't really go into it. I'm sure
Yeah.
there is, but she didn't really go into it. But I thought that was really interesting because we talked about how as you're cultivating donors, having a conversation in a relationship with a woman who's going to fund you versus a man who's going to fund you is a little bit different. And so making sure you're approaching those relationships, and then being sure that as you plan your giving, or as people plan their giving, you're keeping their kids and their grandkids looped in with your organization as well, because we do know there's going to be a really big transition of wealth happening.
Interesting.
So I thought that was really interesting, in a kind of way that I'm not in development a ton, so it was interesting for me to listen in on that. And then they had a few others. So one was confidence and self-awareness and leadership, and that was a really good one. The gal did a really nice job of kind of asking us as the class to look introspectively and determine, like, where are we confident as leaders and where are we not confident as leaders, and where we're not confident, why is that, and how can we kind of help develop our skills. So that had some good takeaways. We had one on performance management, so talking about staff evaluations or reviews or whatever you want to call it, and how those are so important, and the frequency that we should be doing those. So a lot of places will do those once a year, but sometimes what's happening is people get blindsided if that's the only performance review that's happening. So making sure that we have one-on-ones or kind of mini reviews set up throughout the year was a good point for her to bring up. And then one that was really, really good that I liked a lot was called Enhancing Connection Through Conversation, and that was by Schwartz. And she did a really nice job of talking about how do we give feedback and how do we receive feedback, both positive and constructive. And I think that goes a long way in our industry, because a lot of people get into this industry because they're passionate about what we do, and maybe they have really good horse skills, or they have really good skills with individuals with disabilities. But sometimes I think that the business or the leadership piece is harder for people.
Yeah.
And so I think really honing in on that and developing those as leaders in our industry is important. And she talked a lot about that, and about how that's important even when we're talking about managing our volunteers, or your relations with horse owners or things like that. So that was a really good, interesting one that was there as well.
I like that type of information was available at that conference, because you recently were selected to be a part of the AQHA leadership series or program.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of your personal development that you're working on right now. Why do you think we're now seeing some of this leadership stuff pop up, or why do you think it's important? Why haven't we seen that stuff before?
I feel like one of the big reasons that's happening right now is because you look at those of us that have been in the industry a while, and I think this is like we're hitting the first time ever that this industry is getting to the point where people can have livable wages and people can really look at this as a profession and something they can do for a full career. And I think as part of that, you have to have that leadership piece. And then there's those of us that are getting older, and we need to make sure that there are people and we have that succession planning in place so that people can step up. But I think as we have grown as an industry, we've really, again, seen that it can be a profession, it can be a career track for people. And part of that, we have to have that piece.
And I think there's been a big push in the industry as a whole to become more sustainable, which I think goes along with exactly what you just said, Edie, that we do want to make this our career. And so being sustainable as a program has really started to be like a driving force of the industry. And I think as that's come to light, people have started to discover that it's not just being financially stable or financially sustainable. If you want to be sustainable as an organization, you have to have good leadership. If your executive director can't manage the people, or your volunteer manager can't manage the volunteers, that's not sustainable as an organization. And so I think there's just been a little bit more that people are starting to realize that that's a big piece of things that a lot of us maybe don't have.
So that this same weekend, Edie and I and some other colleagues of ours from HETRA went to Horses and Humans Research Foundation conference in San Antonio, Texas. And so we kind of divided and conquered. We had a group go to Illinois to Region 7, and a group of us go to San Antonio for HHRF. So that was I think a big decision for us as an organization to have that many people gone over a weekend, and and to really dedicate the time to do that. And so I guess before we get into what we learned at HHRF, Edie, I have that kind of question for you. Is like, as our CEO and our leader, what does that mean to you to have us all gone, or to make that decision to let us be gone, but also to have us in some of these really important areas, presenting and connecting with others?
I think it's a very important thing that we have really taken, I guess, ownership of over the last few years, that we do want our staff out there, not only from a learning capacity, but also from a presenting capacity. Some of us have been in this field for, many, many, many years. I think we've learned some really good things. So not only can we present and provide information and knowledge to people, but also we're learning, and that allows us to continue to improve our program. And I think that's one of the things that's made HETRA successful, is that we've always focused on growth and learning, and knowing that we all have more that we can learn and do. And it was hard having everybody away. That was tough. But we were able to do it because we have really good staff, and that's part of succession planning, right? So to have that many key staff away and be able to have our barn continue to run means that we have put those steps in place.
And one thing that I think is funny that Shelby didn't even mention is that she presented at Region 7. Right? And we also our COO, Erin Bevington, also presented at Region 7 conference. And so, not only were you there and you got so much out of like those leadership tracks, and like you were really excited about the education you learned, but you also presented, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you said, Edie, it's a good balance of both, being able to learn and be there to help share, what we have to share too.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, HHRF was an amazing conference. Edie, do you want to talk a little bit about it first from your perspective?
Sure. So their tagline is connect, learn, inspire. And I really feel like that's what I did come away from that conference. It was the first time we've attended the conference. So it was an opportunity. We didn't really know what to expect. And we were going not only to be there and learn, but also to present. So we didn't really know. Of course, we saw some familiar faces, but we also saw a lot of faces we didn't know, and we got to know new people and hear a lot of information on research. I thought the culture of the conference was fantastic.
Yeah.
The willingness willingness for people to collaborate and share and say, here's where we've taken our research. If somebody's interested in taking it further, let us know. We're glad to help. And I really love that attitude that I saw at that conference.
And I never felt overwhelmed by the content. I think sometimes when people think like, oh, you're going to a conference on research, that it's going to be really heavy and kind of heady intellectual stuff that's I think you just kind of think like it might be drier to listen to, right? Unless you're really interested in that kind of thing. But it wasn't at all. All the sessions I sat in were super practical. They shared their data and their research and what they found, and also how it applies to us in the EAS industry. A lot of new programs people are researching, a lot of just different things that I think are really important for our industry as a whole to start looking at. And one of those things is one of my bugaboos, and that is terminology
Mm-hmm.
and being aware of the terminology that we're using, which is especially important for us as researchers, just because of, we're publishing things in the public where the public is learning about us, physicians are learning about us, insurance companies are learning about us, things like that in this very official capacity. And so for all of us to be on the same page with our terminology is really, really important. Go ahead. Edye.
Agreed. I think again, we may not all agree with what the current accepted terminology is, but I think we all must agree to utilize it because otherwise it just confuses the consumer. It confuses our volunteers, our donors. It confuses foundations that support us. And so I think we must agree to utilize that terminology as we go forward. So I know there was a panel of people that came together that looked at this terminology. One of the big takeaways from that was, we often said, equine facilitated psychotherapy or equine facilitated mental health. And what the takeaway from that part of it with the therapy part of it was that the therapy is always first. So it's occupational therapy partnering with horses as part of their treatment protocol rather than being equine assisted occupational therapy. And again, I think we all have to get on the same page so that as we do these research studies, we can all make sure that we are doing this. We're comparing apples to apples. And right now, with some of the stuff that's out there, we don't know if we're comparing apples to oranges or bananas because people call it different things.
And I think the other thing too that as we continue to grow as an industry, which we all know that we're growing at an incredible rate, we have to being on the same page as far as terminology goes helps the public stay informed much more easily, right? So like I see a ton in all of these Facebook groups and things that I'm in that, I'm starting an equine therapy program. And it makes it difficult.
Exactly. And I think even the use of therapy, let's make sure that we can utilize that term, that we do have a therapist involved, because if we don't, then we shouldn't be using the term therapy. But we're certainly not doing equine. I mean, we're not doing therapy on the equine or
unless
on the
you are
horse.
doing therapy
that could be
to the horse.
But that's not really what we're talking about in equine. And so the overarching is still going to be equine assisted services. And then under those services, we're going to have the other pieces, which is going to be the therapy piece of things, going to be the learning piece of things. And they've even developed that down into some different areas. And then we're going to have the horsemanship learning piece of things. So I do think it's helpful to see that. Again, it's helpful for us all to get on the same page so that people know that we've got the same thing happening.
Yeah, and we're a credible professional industry that, we know what we're doing. And so that is all part of it. If we're all using different terminology, I mean, imagine if you went online to find an electrician and all of the electricians called themselves something different. You'd be like, who are you? What are you doing?
Exactly.
So I'm going to share a page from this awesome equine assisted services definitions guide for researchers. This doesn't just apply to researchers. I would urge everybody to go out there to our Facebook and check this out. I'm going to share the page that has optimal terminology, and then it has the outdated terminology as well, to kind of help guide, just guide you in using the correct words and helping us continue to build our industry in a professional way. This episode is sponsored by Killian Insurance Agency. Killian Insurance Agency proudly serves the EAS and EAP communities, offering insurance solutions tailored to your unique needs. They provide coverage for therapy horses, equipment, camps, events, and facilities while addressing the specific liability concerns of your programs. Whether you operate an EAS center, provide EAP services, or manage a ranch or farm without these programs, they're here to protect your work. If you're new to the EAS or EAP industry, they can guide you through the coverage process. Contact Killian Insurance Agency today to discuss how they can help safeguard your critical impact that you make on individuals and communities. Find them at www.farmequineinsurance.com or at the link in the show notes. So another thing I took away from HHRF, which I am really excited about, is the equine welfare track. So they had an entire track dedicated to equine well-being. And Edye, you presented in that track.
Yes.
You did equine strategic planning. So do you want to talk a little bit about some of those tracks? I know you went to a lot of those presentations and presenting in it as well. Kind of what was your feeling on it?
Yeah. So I think as an industry, we have to have focus on equine welfare, and that incorporates so many, from how do we handle our horses, how do we manage our horses. So are they in a stall? Are they turned out? When they're turned out, do they have turnout friends? When we are managing their diets, what does that look like? And how we are partnering with them in our programming, I think, is another huge thing. And so one of the pieces we talk about in equine strategic planning is the weight limits, and that's a huge thing. That was a topic that, of course, had some questions when I presented on it. And we do weight limits here every 12 weeks. It's not even questioned by anybody. Each of our horses has a weight limit for both balanced and unbalanced riders. And it's just not a question. We just do it. It happens. And it's an important piece of making sure our horses stay with us for a long period of time.
That topic continues to ruffle feathers. I think
Yes.
that is so interesting.
I had a lot of questions about it again at Region 7 when I
Yeah.
presented on it.
And I don't know, I think it's good. To me, that's good that people are starting to ask more questions about it, and get, excited, I guess, by the topic of weight limits, because that shows us that things are starting to shift a little bit more, and maybe we are shifting more towards, like you said, Edye, being more aware of that weight limit and how that impacts our horses and the longevity of them in our programs, right? I think as we start to add more participants and complexity of cases and things like that, how are you managing that? And putting a lot of time and effort and thought into that process so that you don't get into some of these things that people are really worried about, like discrimination and, things like that when it comes to weight.
Right, absolutely. And I think we have to be, as an industry, we have to be policing ourselves in these things, because it's, other industries, other people in the horse industry look at our industry and maybe look at something that they see happening or see a picture on Facebook, and they just, cringe, and they think that's happening at all the programs, and it's not. But I do think we have to become more aware of what is the effect that what we're doing having on the horse. And and sometimes there's things that we have to not be able to, not we have to stop doing so that we can manage and maintain our horses.
Right. Just because your horse is a saint or that steady Eddy doesn't mean that you're not impacting them in some way, especially long term down the road. But also, like you said, the optics of it, right? Like, it's just It's a lot.
Absolutely. You put those pictures out there again. One program puts something out there, represents all of us a lot of times. And so we really want to make sure we're putting our best foot forward. And again, not just that that's public facing. We do that every day here in our program. We want to make sure, again, our horses are happy, healthy, sane, and sound.
That's right.
And I just hope that this conversation continues for equine welfare because they are the heart of our program. They are the center of what we do. And we need to make sure that their voices are heard, and their voices are only heard if we speak for them.
100%. And that's why I mean, if you've listened to the podcast before, you know we stand on this soapbox quite often, equine welfare and equine well-being. And so that's why we put together the workshop, right? And the workshop's happening in March. There's still time to get involved in that. I'm going to put the link in the show notes for you guys. We're doing 2.5 days here in Gretna, doing all things equine welfare. It's super overwhelming sometimes, I think, to think about all the pieces that go into it, right? Like what goes into a good equine well-being and welfare program. And so we're going to try to make it simpler. We're going to try to break it down. We're going to spend a lot of time dedicated to each of those sections.
Well, and I think the cool part about it is people are going to get some hands-on
Right.
aspects of things with our horses in our arena, and I think that's really important because you can sit and listen to equine welfare and you can think, yeah, that's a great takeaway. But when you actually do a saddle fit, or you actually get to feel what saddle doesn't fit, or how does that leading technique actually work? Can I do it? How does that feel if I have my hands on it? I think that's really cool.
One of the things I'm most excited for that clinic is the saddle fit portion, because that's one thing that I heard this weekend is, how do we fit saddles? How do we fit saddles? Like, I think there's a lot of people out there presenting on saddles. I'm not going to call it saddle fit.
Yeah.
I'm going to call it saddles, that they are presenting on, like the structure of saddles, or
Why we should use one.
why a saddle works,
Yeah.
like what a saddle should do. But I don't know that there's anybody that I'm aware of that's really teaching people how to be practical in their program. Like there's people that will come out from a company and say, oh, you can buy XYZ saddle for these horses and it's going to cost you $1,200 a piece. We can't afford that. So it's about, what do we have and how can we make it work? But people have to know, they have to know how to feel for that. So I'm really excited to be able to get people hands-on with that. I also think it's worth noting that we do have a virtual option for that. We are coming up on that quick, so I know travel plans can. I mean, I'm happy to just up and travel, but a lot of people aren't. And so the virtual option I think will be really good. And I mean, we won't get some of the hands-on portion with the virtual piece, but we'll get a lot of the information out there too.
For sure. I am most excited about the one-on-one coaching that's going to happen with this clinic. So as we go through the workshop, we're going to obviously look at each individual piece of an equine welfare program in a lot of depth. And we're going to give our participants that are at the workshop, some worksheets and some materials to work through kind of with their center program buddy or whoever. And then at the end, they're going to actually sit down one-on-one with a HETRA staff to kind of look at it and say, okay, what do you feel like is your biggest priority? Where do you want to, focus for your equine welfare program in your center? How do you make it work for you? Because I think that is one of the things that we try to do at HETRA, is that just because we do it this way doesn't mean that's going to work that way for your program, or it's going to be, a perfect fit for you. So how can we tailor that to work with your resources and your schedule and what's practical for you? So I think that coaching part is going to be really successful.
And I think having that piece where we can actually write it down and look at that is and something they can take back and it's tangible. Is a much better approach, because I hope then that they have something that they can implement. And again, it doesn't have to be something big. It just has to be a starting point. And that's again where we go when we come back from conferences. I have something fun I want to talk with our horse team about. I haven't mentioned it to anybody yet. That's always an but it's just maybe a one place where we can start implementing something just a little bit different. That might be really good for our horses. But again, if it's written down and when there's a plan, then it's going to be more likely to be implemented down the road, and not something like, oh, well, I'll have to think about how exactly would I do that.
Right. How many presentations have you sat in that you're like, I'm glad that works for you, but that would never work for me.
Right.
So how do we make that better for the folks that are attending? And the virtual, the participants that attend the workshop virtually also get some of that coaching as well. It's just virtual. So that'll be a good thing for everyone to take
And
away.
I think we still have some scholarships available,
We do.
which is really cool.
We do. Shout out to the American Quarter Horse Foundation for helping us with those scholarships. We're going to provide, I think we got some full and some partial scholarships left. So go out to the website and apply. You could very well attend for free. So that would be pretty cool.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for sitting down with me, guys. I know we were busy and gone last weekend, and I took some more of your time today, so I appreciate you sharing it with me. And we're getting ready to head to Minnesota.
Region 6.
Region 6. So if you're in Region 6, come see us. We're going to be there at the PATH International Region PATH International Region Conference there.
What are you guys presenting on?
I'm going to do equine strategic planning again.
Awesome. I'm doing understanding seizures in EAS.
Two very great topics.
Yeah. All right. Well, more to come on that. And we'll see you all next time.
That's all for today. But until the next episode launches, scroll down to the show notes and click on the link to get plugged in with us on Facebook, Instagram, or our exclusive educational club at Patreon. This podcast is presented by HETRA University, the educational arm of Heartland Equine Therapeutic Riding Academy in Gretna, Nebraska. HETRA University's mission is to provide high-quality educational offerings to the EAS community. Check out all the HETRA University has to offer at www.hetrauniversity.org.